So hi everyone, and thanks very much for joining us tonight on the latest edition of the HIGH5 Sports Nutrition webinar series. They seem to be going down exceptionally well at the moment. So when you're on a good run, what do you do? Well, you do more of it, of course, and you make sure that you're sending a strong message out there. We've got another fantastic guest again tonight. It's a follow-up from something we did a month or so ago that got great feedback. My name's Phil Kelly. I'm from an organisation called Pro-Noctis. I'll be your host this evening. Just to give you the ins and outs of how it's going to work, if you haven't been on one of these before, I'll be sitting and having a quick sort of conversation for 30 minutes or so with our guest. We have another colleague of mine called Nathan Abbott who will be running the chat box. So please engage with him and have a productive conversation in there. And by all means, fire any questions in there around any of the topics we're talking about tonight or anything that comes to mind, and Nath will then send them on to me in a private message. Of course, we'll do everything we possibly can to ask as many questions as we can, but we are limited to the hour between 8 and 9 p.m. UK time tonight. So please bear with us if we don't quite get round to your questions, but we'll do everything we possibly can. Before we get into the meat and bones of tonight's session, then I'd just like to introduce Cooley from HIGH5. We'd just like to say a few words. Cooley, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, Phil. Thanks for joining us, and thanks, Nick, for coming again. To everybody that was here last time with Nick and Phil, welcome back. Thanks for coming again. For the new joiners, I'm sure that you'll get a load out of this session, and we're just super happy to have you along. So, yeah, welcome. Thanks for joining, and I hope you have a really nice time. If your questions don't get asked, we will post it, and please check out all of our social media and stuff in the follow-up for anything that you need going forward. And if you need anything at all outside of that, just drop us a line in the contact on the website, and I'll get back to you. So I hope you have a nice time, and yeah, hand it back over to Phil and Nick.
Cheers, Cooley. Thanks very much. So there we go. Let's get straight into it then. So this is a follow-up. We had a great conversation with Nick a few weeks back talking about all things running, endurance, triathlons, the lot. And I think tonight the overall topic is around the marathon season that's coming up. So first of all, Nick, how are you? How are you doing these days?
I'm okay. Thanks ever so much for having me back. You foolish lot. Wonderful. Looking forward to it.
I was thinking the same, but I didn't want to say that. So it must have gone down well. So we're going to have a nice chilled out talk, but really get into the meat and bones and a little bit deeper, I think, after our last conversation, because I think it was quite broad. And of course, people got amazing tips from it. And I personally had notes of thanks, certainly about the content from you and the tips and tricks. I think you made people's lives easier, which is obviously what we're after. So let's get straight into it then. So marathon season coming up. What's the topics or conversations you're having with your coaches and your runners at the moment and your athletes?
Well, we're kind of into the twilight hours, aren't we, of training? We're into that bit now where it's beginning of September, and you know, if you're doing Brighton, it's a couple of weeks around the corner. If you're doing London, it's a month away. Manchester's 5 weeks away. It really depends where you're going. If you're doing a marathon, if you're doing halves, there's a whole host of them now coming up. So we're into that last 3 or 4 weeks. Do we do those final 2 long runs? How well's it been going? My mate's been doing more than me, or I've seen this person on Strava and they've done that, and should I try this? And it's kind of a game at the moment of really trying to hold it together and understanding where you're at, what you perhaps need to do a bit more of to finish off, and ultimately, when does your taper start, and when are you going to be brave enough to say, do you know what, it's done, I'm ready, and I'm good to go out there. So it's a very unusual time, this. The last 3 or 4 weeks or last couple of weeks can be very nervy, I think, for a lot of people, and really I think there's a lot of things you can do to really help yourself in this period.
Do you see a lot of panic training? So I mean, life, like we talked about this last time. We have the best intentions in the world. We have good training programs, but life takes over. Especially the last 18 months we've had in the world. There's so many external influences on what we're doing. Do you see people, a month, 6, 8 weeks out, do they start panic training a little bit if they haven't got everything they've wanted in the bag by now?
Yeah, I mean, I would define it in various ways. I mean, I see some people are in panic throughout the whole marathon phase, and that's fine actually if it's consistent. But the problem is that there's so much information available now. It's so easy to track what other people are doing. That never used to be a thing. You used to go out for your runs. You knew what you were doing. You might read a magazine. You might chat to someone at your club or other people you run with, but that would be it until you got to the event. You didn't know what everybody else was doing. Now it's reasonably easy, I think, to find out what most people are doing at any time. And the problem with that is you then start to swerve and you change just at a time when perhaps your own training is going to suddenly hit the sweet spot, but it hasn't quite got there yet. You forget that you've had a cold or you've just had an easy week for whatever reason. And it's really, I think it's very easy to start chasing the crowd. And you've got to, at some stage, I think in this period, start looking back at what you've done and really remind yourself of all of the good weeks you've done. Perhaps start to look at the best 3 long runs you've done, the best 3 or 4 sessions you've done. And remember that to do those, you had to be in good shape. Things had to have gone pretty well for those runs to have been banked. And at that very moment, you can say that's in the account. You know, I've often said to people as well, you know, if you gave me 100 golf balls, I mean, I play a bit of golf, it's terrible, but if you gave me 100 golf balls, I might just really launch one in the sweet spot and it might go somewhere extra special because it's a game of skill. Running and endurance is a game of fitness. You can't fluke your fitness. So if you've done certain things in training, that is how fit you are. And you've got to start believing in that.
Yeah, there's a few things jumping out there. So you took where my mind went to was a lot of reflection. So when you're looking at for maybe that internal bit of confidence, reflect back on what you've done, you know, rather than constantly looking forward and living in the now to sort of compare yourself against everybody else. Just be in your own little world and reflect back on what you've done. So is that something you proactively sort of encourage your athletes to do?
Definitely, because the gremlin would be on your shoulder now and it will start to get bigger during the taper and this number of weeks out, or the chimp, and it will be speaking to you and it will argue with you. And you'll have to deal with that in certain ways. And I definitely think there comes a point for having a cup of coffee, sitting down, either with your coach or by yourself or 1 or 2 people you run with perhaps, and really going over the training you've been doing, the best runs, but actually look at that journey and what you've achieved in that journey. From what you perhaps set out to do before. Have a little look at why that run went so well. So what you ate just before it, what you ate the morning of the run, the sleep patterns that week, some things that really meant that long run perhaps, or that training session was going to go right, and draw from it. And that is one of those things you're going to take with you. And I actually think you take it with you to 18 miles in the marathon, 20 miles in the marathon, and then you start to draw on those things in the last 6, 7, 8 miles as well.
So I suppose you're talking about, you know, the reflection of that good run or those 3 or 4 good runs. You're looking at the whole piece there then. So you're looking at how well did I sleep the night before? What time did I go to bed? How hydrated were I? What did I eat the night before? What did I eat the morning before? What time of day did I run? And all that, trying to prime then in terms of, I suppose, getting yourself into that position where you're running at the right time, the time of your race, depending on where you're running, of course. Yeah,
because I think as well in the last 3 or 4 weeks, your body doesn't like change. It takes a while to adjust to change. So you don't want to change too much. I hear people a lot of the time at this sort of period saying, you know, my long run 3 weeks out or 4 weeks has got to go well. Everything rests on that run. It doesn't. What you've done over the last 3 months, the last 6 months, probably the last year is going to have a far greater influence, in my opinion, over your marathon performance. But of course, you do want some of those runs to be going well. That would be obvious because you want some little indications of how your training is really going. But don't hang everything on just 1 or 2 runs that are yet to happen. Look at that bigger picture. Try to really practice that routine that's going to be the thing you're going to do on race day in these final key long runs, though, just so that nothing changes really. On event day, you've done it before. Those that have raced many times will have their routine and have their things that work for them. But if this is your first marathon, the taper is bigger than you've been used to, I'm sure, and that's going to be unusual. So, you know, let's start to have some plans around this now and develop a mindset. Almost create your own protective bubble that's going to protect you between 2 to 3 weeks out and the gun going.
Can we just focus in on that taper then? So we obviously know how important it is. So I think sometimes we miss the fundamentals of it. So what's the science behind tapering and what's the reason for it? Let's just revisit the very simple stuff.
Okay. So I would say, and so a lot of people I've worked with over the years, and I've really, you know, felt really understood this for me, would simply say that less becomes more, on the basis that if you say the training you do today probably takes 2 to 3 weeks to really come out in the system and for the body to make all the adaptations it needs at a cellular level to move on in sustained real fitness terms. You get to a point 2 to 3 weeks out, certainly for a marathon, where it's quite likely you're not going to get any fitter because there's not enough time for that regeneration to happen. The other factor as well is when you're out doing 20 miles something long runs, which quite a few people will be doing in their marathon prep, and that long run 3 or 4 weeks out includes some marathon pacing, might be a long progression run, so it's gradually getting tougher or faster as the run goes on, all things which are clever with your training. That in itself needs a respectful amount of recovery as well. So not only are you not going to get fitter in the last 2 to 3 weeks, you've actually got to, definitely from your marathon prep, recover from the training you've been doing. And it's so easy in a marathon, I think, to overcook it with too many long runs or too much put together in the final stages. And then you go out on marathon day and you don't hit the wall because your nutrition was good, you did your gels, you got all these things right. But you know what, you go out and you just get to 16, 17, 18 miles and it just feels hard work. You don't dramatically slow down, but you fade, you can't really pick up. It's not happening. That's probably because at a cellular level, the body, the mitochondria in the cells, different aspects of your physiology just haven't quite recovered. And you want to start the marathon 100% fresh and definitely 100% healthy. And I've always felt that the athlete that's 100% fresh and 100% healthy, but perhaps only 80, 90% fit, will outperform the one that's 110% fit, but also 110% tired. So be fresh.
Physical and emotionally tired as well, aren't they? Because it plays on their mind going forward. So
yeah.
I think sometimes that's skipped over. Whilst it might be obvious, the reason why we taper is really important to visit that. So obviously that's the reason behind that question. And then talking specifically about tapering, I see people panicking a little bit, not sticking to the plan, not sticking to the program, and then going doing some bizarre things. And let's get straight into the interaction here. So we've got a question here from Peter actually saying, I'm coming to the last few weeks of my long runs for my first marathon. My plan goes to 20 miles. Do I go further than 20 miles or stick to just 20?
You're going to get me straight on the killer question straight away. I'm probably known amongst some people for sticking my neck out on this one. I think you can go too far on your longest runs. And I think once your longest runs are sort of 3.5 hours or more, my question to you is, are you really going to recover from those properly, like I've just described, in a few weeks' time? So I think if you're going to do 3.25 to 3.5 hours, maybe a little bit over, or 20 miles or 21 to 22, 23, if you're an elite athlete and you're looking to do the marathon in 2.5 hours or under, you're going to go out and do these longest runs, but you're not going to go out for more than 2.5 hours or so for your longest run. So your recovery is going to a point, be a little bit easier to judge. It's the difficult area is when your longest run's been 16, 17, 18 miles, but you've been out for 3.5 hours. Do you now go out and do some extra? Well, maybe you can do that a little bit and get to 20. But once your long runs go into 4.5, 5 hours, because you're desperate to get 20 odd miles in, I think you're not going to recover. So I think you've got to, at some stage around the 3.5 hour mark, say, that's it. All of my training over the 12 weeks is what's going to get me around the marathon. My threshold running is definitely going to be a big part of this for the last 10 miles. And actually, it's going to go well. I don't need to have been out for 4 or 5 hours on my longest runs. But that's quite a brave step. But that's where I see it. And if you
that makes sense to me. Is there an element as well where, especially guys that are doing it for the first time, and if there's a bit of a crowd there, does the last few miles carry them a little bit anyway? In terms of adrenaline being released and
massively so. There's so many factors on marathon day, particularly if you do something like London, Brighton, Manchester, where you're going to get plenty of support. You head over Tower Bridge, or in fact, you go past Cutty Sark at 6-7 miles in the marathon at London. The biggest problem you're going to have is slowing down. And I really hope you do, because the hairs on the back of your neck are going to go up. It's like an amphitheater. There's walls of noise all around you. And this is your 15 minutes and you're going to pick it up. And I think they've tracked it before, that the fastest splits for a lot of people at London are between Cutty Sark and Tower Bridge, because you're still fresh. You've really warmed up well. It's 6 miles to then the halfway point at Tower Bridge. and you feel great. Of course you feel great. You train for a marathon and you're not even run halfway yet. So you're going to feel great. So you pick it up and you go too quick. And then you pay for it later in the race. So, 6 miles in, halfway, slow down, be sensible, be on target, or even be behind your target, and just be super patient. There's been many a phrase coined with this, halfway isn't really halfway, it's probably 20 miles. And I think the great Greta Weitz, who won New York 9 times and London a number of times, said that everything you do to 20 miles is just transport, and the marathon begins at 20 miles. And if you remember that, you're going to get there in good shape, ready to throw the kitchen sink at the last miles. And that will probably enable you to maintain the even pace if you do that. And who knows, you may even then negative split. So I would be super patient and look at it that way.
Yeah, I suppose you get, again, there's a bit of a double whammy there. So you talk about London, going around cut your sock. Not only are you excited, so you're gonna run a little bit quicker potentially if you're not in control of your thoughts, feelings, and behavior. But also I think as well, you get that adrenaline rush, which you're going to pick your heart rate up anyway. And I think we were talking about it last time. I went out and did a big event not so long ago, and I remember, within the first couple of miles, it was on the bike, and I looked down and I was at 160, and I wasn't pedaling particularly quickly. So it wasn't effort, it was adrenaline, I think. So I had to really, for the next couple of miles, really, take control of my breathing, dial things down a little bit to take control of my body again. Is that something similar you see with the runners?
It's more of a male problem than female.
Is it?
Yeah, I see a lot more men go off too hard than I ever see ladies go off too hard. Ladies, I think they're maybe more cautious in their approach, or maybe just, do you know what, better at listening and judging their own bodies. I think there's a bit of a Braveheart approach sometimes, and the testosterone gets a bit too much of us, and we're off. That's it. We're off to war, and we're going to do this. And we can't be patient and hold back and just wait and gradually squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. And testosterone's got to be managed. And the other thing I would say with that as well, on race morning, particularly for a marathon, you've always had your breakfast 2 to 3 hours before, and then you feel fine. Race morning, watch that a little bit, because the adrenaline's kicking on. You'll have had your breakfast, but you'll be nervous when you have it. So graze on it. Don't expect it to be so easy to eat as normal, but graze on it. And then I would actually, and you need to practice this in training, I think you should graze on an energy bar or something almost up until about an hour before, and then do your long run. Because on race day, you're going to walk up the hill to the start, or whatever marathon you're doing, you're going to be walking around. That's more than you'd normally do. The nerves are jangling, you're really on it, and you're burning calories all the time. So you've eaten into your carbohydrate stores in that hour or two before the event. So snack and graze up until an hour before, and then really work hard to either stop yourself from being negative. So you focus on the positives and surround yourself with positive people, or focus on the things that have gone well. And also really work hard on your splits and backing off and being patient and not being tempted, because boy, will you love it in the second half when you're going past people that didn't do that, and you will go past them.
And also you don't get the guilt after when you look back and go, I knew I shouldn't have run that fast.
Absolutely.
I knew I was going too quick, but I didn't slow down. Don't listen to your own body. Yeah, great. Some great tips in there, especially that bit about, the routine before the start race, before your training ride is training run is very different to think about where you're going. That's a great tip. Let's dig a bit deeper into taper then. What's the key principles for people that are just coming into that phase now? What's the things they need to have the forefront of their mind?
Okay, so I think for a marathon, your longest runs will probably be about 3-4 weeks out, depending on who you are. I often tend to favor 4 weeks out and then still do a good long run 3 weeks out. 2 weeks out tends to be, I would suggest no more than 2 hours, but there might be some clever things in it still. And then the week before, probably, depending on who you are, 60, 80, 90 minutes, just depends, but it's going to be less that week before. The rest of your training, and this is often a shock to people, and other people may disagree, I don't think the rest of your training should change that much 3 weeks out and even 2 weeks out. I think pretty much everything stays the same. You're still working. You might be doing slightly quicker sessions because you're tuning up. You're putting a little bit of icing on the cake. That would make sense, but you're still training definitely as frequently as normal. And the intensity is still pretty good 3 weeks out and 2 weeks out. And the volume is pretty good still for the rest of the week. It's your long runs that have changed. But I think in that final 10 days, then other things start to change as well. And the intensity might back down again a bit more. You may have an extra rest day, but you're certainly going to reduce the volume. And race week really is just about ticking over some light, maybe a light session early in the week, but everything else is just easy runs, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, but it's going to be easy stuff. And you're going to arrive super fresh, but you don't want to suddenly take loads of rest days and then arrive sluggish, which is the classic, because then you eat more anyway, because you're carbo loading a bit, or you're certainly eating more carbohydrate than perhaps you would normally. I understand that, but you end up feeling like Henry VIII, and you probably run like him as well. So yeah,
I'm guessing he wasn't a good runner.
No. Definitely not.
So tapering, that's almost, it's just the finishing piece, isn't it? It's the final preparation after your months and months of hard work. We've talked a lot about volume and intensity of training. Do people neglect their nutrition plan though? I'm rehearsing it.
They neglect it. And the other thing that happens, and this is really hard psychologically, and I understand it, and I've chatted to so many athletes about it over the years, and I get it. I felt like it myself even. Because you're starting to train less, the temptation is to eat less. And yet we want the body to compensate, and if anything, store some glycogen and be consistent with its glycogen stores on race week as well, not just try to do everything in the last day or two. Now, if you can just keep your fueling consistent on race week, the fact that you're gradually training less, you're sleeping hopefully more, you'll go to bed a bit earlier, we then see the energy levels really rise, and that's really, really good. If you are going to do some kind of bleed out diet, and I'm always cautious of this, I'm not really a fan of it, but some athletes will do it, and one or two of mine do. Then the bleed out diet, by the way, is where you'll probably do a reasonably good long run the weekend before, which in itself can be controversial. And then you're not going to eat carbohydrate for a few days. And then suddenly midweek, you'll start eating carbohydrate. The body super compensates, and in theory can store a bit more. Now, that could have been relevant years ago, and some people do perhaps see a slight swing, but they've practiced it, and to a point they're comfortable with it. So don't try it if you've never tried it before. The other thing with that, though, is a lot of that was pre-gels and pre-sports drinks. And now you probably don't need to do that and take that risk of all of that discomfort and the chance that it's going to backfire. So eat consistently, snack and graze really well on race week in between your meals, never hungry race week, never hungry, and really be clever in the final 24 hours with your choices on foods, the type of carbohydrates you get on with. Maybe reduce your fiber a little bit, and maybe start to reduce protein, because you're not going to need as much as that in the final 24 hours, but you want to probably top up a bit on carbohydrate. That kind of strategy and practicing that in these last couple of long runs, and then taking it into a race day, is going to really help you with your taper. And definitely try and get some extra sleep, because the night before the race, you're going to be counting sheep jumping over the wall all night, and you may not sleep that well, but it won't matter because you've slept well early in the week, and you'll be fantastic.
Yeah, fully loaded. No, again, some great points in there. The key last runs or last sessions. Can you just give us sort of the broad spectrum of some of your athletes? Are some of them from a marathon? Are some of them doing a 15-mile quick, or are they doing a 23, or they're doing a 35-mile run? Is it individualized?
Yeah, it is individualized, because when you know them really well, there's certain things that make them tick, and they kind of feel like, I'm ready. And you love it when an athlete turns around to you and says, I'm ready. Sometimes you have to remind them they're ready, but that's okay. I think, you've got to do a few little tests. 3 or 4 weeks out, you're probably going to be out doing, and if you're pretty experienced, you might be out doing something like a 35K, 37K type progression run, something like that, where the run might go something like 10K easy, 10K marathon pace, 5K easy, 5K marathon pace, and then it picks up and picks up. So the overall line of the run is that the effort gradually picks up. And the theory behind that, of course, is that the marathon on race day, you'll try and run it even effort and even pace, but the reality is you'll gradually have to work harder in the second half to maintain that pace. So you want to practice having to work harder as the long run goes on, and that's what a progression run will physiologically help you to do. So that kind of thing will happen 3 or 4 weeks out. You're going to be putting some bigger blocks of marathon pace in. You might even go and do a half marathon or something like that at your marathon pace, and hope that the half marathon felt pretty controlled. Yes, you were working, but you finished it and felt like you could have carried on and it was all great, and you do some extra miles afterwards. That would be good. There's going to be some key sessions, I would hope. So, you might go out there and do some bigger blocks of threshold running. And, at the start of your plan, you were doing 5 by 5 minutes, and now suddenly it's 4 by 10 minutes or 3 by 10 minutes, and it's really controlled and you're running faster, but the same heart rate, and it's great. You know, look how much fitter I am. There could be some clever sort of training sessions, you know, things like I say 5K at marathon pace, 5 times a K at 10K effort, then 5K at marathon pace. And that last 5K at marathon pace is a bit of a sandwich session. That last 5K at marathon pace can feel a little bit like a 5K in the later stages of a marathon, because you've taken something out of the tank with the faster work before and a bit of marathon pace before it as well. So you're going to pick some clever training sessions in those final few weeks that will test you, but you're going to put a big tick next to afterwards and say, yes, that felt good.
Psychologically, though, there's a massive boost there because it's variety, isn't there? Because I think some you know, first time, second time, third time marathon runners, they're just going out and trying to get round 15, 16, 17, 18 miles. And you know, to go and do that at a plod or a set pace can be quite monotonous, can't it? But what you were talking there, that's one of those interactive sessions where it'll probably go not exceptionally quick, but it will go quicker because it's broken down into chunks.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm really hoping on race day, by the way, you're going to break the marathon down into chunks. You're really going to just focus on the mile you're in, or you're going to focus on every 5K and just tick it off. You're not going to be one of those runners that does the first mile in the marathon and then goes, oh God, I've got 25 to go, you know, because if that's a long day out, you know. So do get used to breaking these sessions down and looking at the way this works. If it's your first marathon and you just want to do the distance, which, you know, brilliant, fantastic, run round at the speed of chat. Your long runs, I've hoped, have made, you probably have a goal roughly of what, everyone has a rough goal of what they'd like to do for the marathon. I refuse to believe that people don't. They always do if you dig deep. But you're going to run around at the speed of chat. If you can't chat to the person next to you, you're running too hard. So really be comfortable in your long runs, final runs, and on race day itself. If you're walking, have a plan with that. Don't say, right, my strategy is to go to 16 miles or run as far as I can, and then when I'm exhausted, I'll start walking, because that's a really long day out in the office, and that last 10 miles is going to be awful. Okay, you're going to feel so depleted and you'll have hit the wall. If you're going to walk, and it can be really successful as a strategy, then a mile easy, perhaps, mile brisk walk. Mile easy, mile brisk walk, so walking with a purpose. And if you keep that going, the average finishing time at somewhere like the London Marathon, in fact, I think, sorry, the busiest finishing time I've read for the London Marathon is about 5.5 hours. That's when the most amount of officials and support is there to help you at the end. And if you walk, the average finishing time is around about 5:15 to 6 hours. So you can see you still finish right in the thick of it, and you overtake an awful lot of people that got to 16 and then drifted for 10 miles and slowed and slowed. So have a strategy and really, really kind of think about that before.
Yeah, great. We appreciate that. So if, and I think this might be an impossible question, but I'll ask it anyway. The perfect week coming up to your marathon. So
yeah,
marathon's on a Sunday. We're looking at Monday morning. What's that week look like? What's the key big highlight pieces in there?
Okay, so really good question, actually. It's good to break it down. I think probably the Saturday and Sunday before you'd have done your final long run, 75, 90 minutes. Monday, I'd be tempted to go and have a bit of a massage, get all of that out of the system. If you normally have Monday off, have Monday off. If you were due an extra day's rest, you felt you needed it, take it early in the week and have Monday off, but have that massage. Foam roll, do your stretching, eat well, early night. Don't worry about what everyone else did that weekend on Strava. Tuesday, I would actually still do something a little bit more aggressive. So Tuesday, you might go out and do some threshold blocks, but you know, it might be a 45-minute run with some blocks of threshold in. You might go out and do something like a few 800s or something, clipping along at half marathon or 10K effort. You may even add a few 400s at the end of it to turn your legs over, but it's not a massive session. Okay, depends. You know, if you're looking for a fast time, you're gonna know a few sessions that you can scale down. They're going to turn your legs over, but the volume is not going to be more than probably, I would suggest 3, 4, 5K volume at the very most. Okay, and if it's some threshold blocks, it's going to be a few of them. Wednesday, one easy light run. With all of this, you'll be doing some more foam rolling stretching. You might get another massage in if you're used to them, Wednesday or Thursday. If you're not used to them and you've never had them before, be very careful race week with those. So you might have something early in the week, but not later in the week. Your next rest day, depending on how many days a week you run, might be, say, Friday. And I've said that on purpose because I always think the day before a marathon, you should go out and do a run. I think you should go out and do 10, 20 minutes, 30 minutes if you're more experienced. Just get your legs turning over the day before and run easy. You will probably run and question whether you can do 1 mile at marathon pace tomorrow, because your body is very clever. It's holding back on all the adrenaline now, and it's not giving you that. And that's your liquid gold. It's not giving you that because it knows that tomorrow you're going to ask it to do something ridiculous for 26.2 miles. So it's holding back everything it can. And it just makes you feel sluggish, you feel awful. But you know what? Tomorrow your legs will feel looser because of it. And when the gun goes, the adrenaline's released and you'll feel fantastic. And that's when you've got to slow down. So kind of have maybe an extra rest day earlier in the week or an extra easy day. And then later in the week, have a day off or have an easier day. But the day before, I would still do something really light. A lot of the big marathons have something like a 5K the day before. And you can go and do an easy 5K the day before, have a stretch. You'll feel great tomorrow. Whatever it is, do something the day before. But I wouldn't go to the expo for 8 hours, come out exhausted like you've been Christmas shopping, because that will make a difference tomorrow. So be organized with things like going to collect your number, and please take food with you, because there won't be as much there as you'd hope for. And do what you've got to do, out, put your feet up and relax. Don't go Christmas shopping the day before your marathon.
There were so many good things in there, and the one for me is a little bit of peace of mind that it's not just me that gets knackered Christmas shopping. It's not just me. And I think the expos I've been to as well, they're not always the right selection of food that you need the day before. So that preparation is so important, because, you know, whichever way you look at it, it's a business, isn't it? You know, the way they put it on, and they try and host this for families and friends, not just the runners.
Yeah, and I don't want to say you've got to go to the expo and to collect your number. And I'm not saying don't go and have a great time, because if you love running, it's like, you know, being in a chocolate factory. It's fantastic. There's all of the, you know, the latest whatever there from all the brands. There's loads of runners to talk to. There's so much stuff going on. There's probably some great interviews. It's really exciting. But you can just suddenly look at your watch and think, oh my God, I've been here 4 or 5 hours. What am I doing? And you'll feel okay because you're so excited. But that evening you'll feel really tired, and the following day you'll be really washed out. So, you know, the day before in particular, but all week, you should be really clever with what you're eating it really regularly. Don't assume that there'll be pasta or rice or the right sandwiches for you at the expos, in the exhibition halls, because funny enough, everybody else wants it too. So be super organized. And that's another point as well. And it's the same with any race, isn't it? The night before, if you're staying in a hotel, take your favorite foods with you. And if you're going to go and have pasta or whatever, book the Italian restaurant now, not, you know, that evening, because it won't be ready. It won't work for you. So take your favorite breakfast, take your favorite foods with you, be totally self-sufficient, and then you won't get caught out.
Yeah, great stuff. Let's zoom in really specifically then, because I know we've got a lot of guys on the call. You can see a bit of questions coming in. This is probably the last direct question for me before we go to the questions in the chat box. Zoom in on that 24 hours then. Let's go, you know, a bit more finer detail. That tip you gave earlier was brilliant, in terms of, you know, if you're going to go for a little run the day before, you're going to feel like lead. That's brilliant, because I think once you know how you're supposed to be responding, it gives you confidence in what's going on.
Completely.
Yeah, so it's that knowledge.
And we've all felt like it. You know, we've all got, oh my God, my legs can't move. I don't know if I should race tomorrow. And then you know, that voice in the back of your head is kind of saying, hey, hang on a minute, come on. But you've got to find that voice and say, look, don't be silly, you're fine. You're absolutely fine. And everyone's been through it. I'm a bit of a fan in the last few days of trying to get your body clock into the sync of race day. Now, if you've got to travel abroad for a race, I think that's really important. But I'm a fan of you definitely the day before trying to get up the same sort of time as you're going to get up on race day, maybe even a day or two before that, but certainly the day before, then having a breakfast that's going to be similar to what you'd have, and then going for your run in the morning, and not too far off when you're going to start your race. Now, that may sound strange, but actually, I just think you're trying to get the body into a routine and get all the bodily functions working so that you go to the bathroom and it's all at the same time. Everything's organized in your digestive system in that way. I think that's really reassuring. And I just think you're kind of then really kind of into the routine when race day comes along. Okay. If you want extra sleep, you take it during the day, but try not to sleep in massively the day before thinking that's going to help, because the following day, I think it's then a shock to the system. All right. So good, healthy breakfast, something that's going to digest well. Mid-morning, you'll be snacking and grazing all morning anyway. Lunchtime, same sort of thing again. Check all your kit, be super organized with that. If you've got to go to the expo, probably go morning rather than afternoon. You don't want to be in that panic, you know, just in case something goes wrong with transport. I'm the one who can't get to the expo and it's going to shut. Reduce all the anxiety, and really almost brief your family as well that you know, they know you're running tomorrow. They're probably going to be looking forward to seeing you, and it's a case of at some stage, because some people are a bit irritable the day before a race as well. You're a bit stressed. I mean, you know, so have that kind of apologize in advance for how you're going to feel the day before a race sometimes. But go through that race diary one more time, reassure yourself, pick out your best long runs, pick out your best training sessions, have all that kit ready. In the afternoon, relax, sit and watch a film, read your favorite book, do something nice. Don't walk too far. Have a bit of a snooze. I think that'd be really good. Catch up on your sleep a bit more. Have an early evening meal. Having snacked all day, nothing too heavy, pasta, rice, light sauce on it, not too many vegetables, all the sort of stuff you can digest. Hasn't got to be too much protein in there. This isn't going to be the best meal of your life. This is about fuel. This is about tomorrow morning. And then relax in the evening, and when you're ready, or if you go to bed, and you know, try and relax, switch off, don't look at your screens too much, worry about what other people are doing. You've got your plan, you know what you're up to. You're a little bit like the gunslinger now. You're going to believe in what you can do. You're going to ride into the village tomorrow morning quietly. You're going to shoot it up, and then you're going to ride out quietly. And this is that rehearsal before it. So keep your gunpowder dry and try not to get too stressed about things.
What's your thoughts on caffeine the morning of? Because I know a lot of my friends, they are caffeine addicts. Most athletes are. So a lot of them try and maybe stay off it for a few days and then have an espresso the morning of. But obviously, going back to the dietary issue or the fiber issues or the caffeine issues, for me, you know, it certainly wouldn't work for me to have a massive latte first thing in the morning before going out and doing a bit of exercise for obvious reasons. But where do you stand on that?
Look, there's so much data out there that supports, you know, having caffeine early just before you go. Certainly it seems to wake us up a little bit, stimulates and gets us fired up, but also perhaps releases some trans fatty acids into the bloodstream that can be a useful additional energy source or make it more readily available. How are you going to time that? What did you normally do? Think about this, because and I get where your question's going, because if you do that at 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning with your breakfast, and then you don't have the caffeine up until 2 hours, 3 hours before you go, have you missed that moment? Because you did it for the breakfast, and yes, you went to the loo and you feel awake and so on. But do you normally have the caffeine just before you do your long run? If that's you, then you need to be doing that just before you do the marathon. So recreate what you've done for your long runs that work for you, and don't change that. And if that means, you know, somehow you've got to buy it, carry it with you, dispose it, do something with it, recreate that. What you don't do is try your first ever double espresso the morning of the race because somebody else is doing it, or as I've seen people do, an hour before or half an hour before, because you're in for a totally out of body experience, and I don't think you should do that. The same as with your gels. You do the gels you practiced, and I'm hoping that many of you on here have tried the caffeine gels and probably fallen in love with them in the second half of your long runs and second half of your marathons, because that's when they're going to really work for you and really get everything into the system more quickly.
Yeah, I've got one friend that actually came off coffee before, but would have a little caffeine gel. Just so psychologically, he felt, I've had my little caffeine hit before I start, and then it gives him the little sort of livening, if you want to call it that, at the start. But then he'd leave until the back half.
And you've just reminded me, and I wanted to answer it actually earlier, and I talked myself out of it. I've got some of my guys will actually stop taking on as much caffeine or bleed out the caffeine in the final week, and then they'll go onto it the morning of the race and actually in the race as well, because they see a bigger response, and that seems to work for them. It's all about those marginal gains, and that seems to work, but you need to have tried that.
Yeah, for sure. Again, that's going back to the preparation and knowing what you're doing. Right, let's get into the questions then. So Rob's asking, he's got his last long run, say it's 20 miles at 2 hours 45, 3 hours. Should he be targeting at marathon pace or slower, or maybe try the last 10 miles at a marathon pace?
You've almost answered it at the end. I wouldn't be doing the whole thing at marathon pace. I think that's too far. I think there's a lot of debate around how big your marathon pace blocks should be. And some people will do as much as 20 miles at marathon pace and they get away with it. But they're normally very experienced and very, very good at recovery. I've seen a lot of very good athletes do 20-mile races at marathon pace or 20-mile runs, the whole thing at marathon pace, and then not perform well on marathon day. I would say your longest blocks of marathon pace are normally sort of 10 miles to half marathon, maybe a fraction more. And if your long run's 2 hours 45, why not do something like the first half of that run, 30 to 45 seconds a mile easier, take all your gels, and then the second half of that long run, gradually put it up to your planned marathon pace and then hold it for the 10 miles you suggested. I think that would be fantastic. That's a really good long run that's going to tick the boxes but not leave you too depleted. It would be good.
Brilliant, thank you. SB is asking, this is a common one. I've bought a brand new pair of shoes.
Right.
How many kilometers should those shoes have done before race day? And any tips on incorporating those shoes into my training ahead of race day?
Says the guy who last year took a pair out of the box and ran a half marathon with his wife the morning of it. Probably shouldn't have done, but actually they were fantastic. But don't do that. That's utterly ridiculous. You should, I think, have done one of your long runs or one or two of your key sessions in those shoes and know they feel fantastic. Then save them as your besties for race day. Of course, you're going to have your favorite race shoes perhaps, but you need to have done a couple of dress rehearsal runs in them that are going to be extended. They're going to be your longer runs, and they need to know what it feels like to be further than halfway in those shoes, because anyone can do a short run in a pair of shoes. Get longer than 13 miles in a pair of shoes. You'll find out whether they really work for you. Okay.
That question got me. I don't know if I imagined this, but did you see about the guy over the weekend that ran a marathon in Crocs?
Yeah. I know.
Should we park that one?
Yeah, please don't get me started.
Okay. Should the last long run, say 20 miles, I've skipped that one, sorry. All right, this is a big one for Mohammed. So I've hit a wall in both marathons I've run, mile 16 and mile 20. Can you please advise on fueling during the run? I think we've touched on it, but if we could encapsulate that for Mohammed.
Yeah, okay. So your fueling starts a few days before, as it would do for your best long run. So hopefully you've practiced this with your long runs, or if not, make sure you do, Mohammed. And you need the night before or the day before your long runs to be snacking and grazing and eating well and focus on good carbohydrates you get on with. So your pasta, rice, that kind of thing, good quality breads, potatoes, and so on. Morning of the long run or the event needs to be, are you a porridge banana type person? Are you bagels and banana? Are you toast? Whatever it is, but it's plenty of carbohydrate. Maybe snack and graze a little bit up until an hour before. Take a bit of energy source type drink as well up until an hour before, so your carbohydrate levels are topped up. Then it's down to your gel strategy, I think. And I know the temptation is I don't need a gel until my body tells me I need it, but the damage is done and you won't get out of the hole. So please take your first gel after 20 to 30 minutes, even though you don't feel like it. And then really, you want at least one gel every half hour to 45 minutes, and sip on it like we've talked about before, and sip on that gel for 5-10 minutes if you have to, little bits at a time, so the absorption rates are good. And really make sure you're doing those gels every half hour to 45 minutes all day around. I would be really surprised if you're hitting the wall because of fueling, if you have that strategy. You'll sip on water every few miles, you'll drink to first or just ahead of it. Maybe do sports drink if it's available, but you've practiced the sports drink that's available on the course. Don't suddenly do a different brand you're not used to. Providing your long runs have been good enough, Mohammed, and you've done the long runs, you're well fueled, you're doing your gels, your pace, you're not going off at Kipchoge's pace thinking you fancy a 2-hour marathon, but you've been training for 3 or 4 hours. I can't see where the problem is. So I'd be really interested to look at why that's happened, actually. I'd be surprised.
I think sometimes I see it across my running friends and my triathlon friends and my cycling friends a lot, is that when they're first getting into it, they're feeling for how they feel rather than what they're about to do. Fueling ahead. So, for me, when I go out and do my 100+ mile bike rides, I'm getting, 60 to 70 grams of carbs before I even get on the bike in an energy drink. So I'm loading it. Obviously, my meal's already digesting. So I'm getting ahead of it. And then I'm going, right, I know I need a bottle of this and a bottle of that each hour. Easier on the bike, I know. But I need a gel. And then when I'm getting a bit tired towards the back end of the 5, 6, 7 hours on the bike, then I've got my gels my chews to get involved in, all these great products. That's part of my fueling strategy. But what amazes me is the people that go, I'm tired, I'm hungry now, I'll eat.
Yeah. And I think we take an everyday living scenario into something where we're burning so many calories every minute, and we just empty the tank, and then we think it's okay to just fill the tank back up. And it doesn't work like that, because you're working in deficit and you will feel awful for a long time and you won't fill the tank back up. You need to understand that once you've dug a hole in a marathon and you start to hit the wall, you're only going to go one way. You cannot get yourself out of that. You've got to stay ahead of the game. And I think the way you described that was brilliant. And you've got to be thinking of how you're going to feel in half an hour or an hour's time, or how you want to feel in half an hour or an hour's time, and constantly eating towards the next half hour, an hour, but really eating for the last hour of your event. Let me give you just one quick scenario on this. And I've used it with people, and it's made them suddenly realize, if you have your breakfast 3 hours before marathon day and you're looking to do a 4-hour, 5-hour marathon, or let's say a 4-hour marathon to make the maths easy here, when you get to the last hour of your marathon, even though you've been doing gels and you've been very, very well behaved, you have not eaten for 6 hours, and you're about to now do an hour at marathon pace. If I sat you all in a room for 6 hours and said, don't move, so you're preserving energy, you're not running, you sit for 6 hours, haven't eaten, and then I get you to leave the room and do an hour at marathon pace, you'd all struggle with it, because your blood sugar levels are low and your glycogen stores will be starting to deplete, because it's just that much amount of time. You need to be snacking and eating regularly. That's why you take a snack up until an hour before you go, if you can. And that's why you really hit this gel type or fuel strategy hard during the race. So you arrive at that final hour ready to up your effort. The hour you need the most energy is the last hour. So you've got to take this energy early in the event to stop yourself being empty.
I think there's a strong message in that. I really like the way that's framed. Yeah, when you put a different slant on it, it really hits home, doesn't it? In terms of that message of what you're asking your body to do. That was great. Thanks so much for that. Ross is asking, so he's got a half marathon this weekend in build up for the London full marathon.
Okay.
He was going to try and run it hard.
Yeah.
Would you recommend Mara pace instead?
I've had this conversation with so many people this week already. I think this depends on where you're at, Ross, in your training. If you feel training's been going really well, you feel that your long runs have been successful, you've done your blocks of marathon pace, you don't feel behind, but you do feel that you'd like to do a half marathon to test your fitness, find out where you're really at. I think there is 3 weeks out enough time for you to, in fact, it's more than that, it's 4 weeks out, time for you to definitely recover. So I would do a mile or two warm up, go for it in your half marathon, and then do a number of miles really easy with another gel afterwards. And it's still a long run, but you've got a really good half marathon in there, and you find out about yourself in that half marathon. It might help you tweak your marathon pace. If you feel that your training's been a little bit behind, or you've missed out on one or two things, I think you've got to look at this in a different way. You want some confidence without it being destructive. So therefore, keep training well the rest of this week. But then on Sunday, I would do a number of miles before the race, do the half marathon at your planned marathon pace, really practicing that strategy, and then do a number of miles afterwards. And you'll finish that day with a really good long run with a big block of marathon pace behind you. And actually 4 weeks out, that might give you the confidence boost if you've been a little bit behind training. But I do think you can still do a fast half marathon 4 weeks before a marathon. You can if your training says that you can afford to to do that this weekend coming. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Rebecca's asking, how long can you taper for before losing fitness? She's given an example here. So she did her last long run of 19 miles 3 weeks ago, and had to take a little break due to an injury, which she has recovered from now. But it's now just over 3 weeks until the marathon. Would you recommend fitting in one last long run, or just continue to run shorter distances and taper?
Okay, so it's a really good question, and there'll be a number of people in this scenario, either through illness or injury. There always are. I think, first of all, that 19-mile run, or the fact that you were up to 19 miles, because there would have been other long runs before then, there's a lot of money in the bank, okay? And I think it takes a good 10 days plus to start to lose real measurable chunks of fitness, okay? But it's never as much as you think. And certainly the first week or 10 days, you won't have lost anything at all. You've just lost confidence. But you could top up here, but don't top up and then get the injury back. So speak to the physio, understand where you're at with what you can do, because you don't want to suddenly jump back up to a really long one. You're kind of in that area here. You need to speak to the physio. But yes, if there could be a longish run or a semi-long run, or maybe even a long run this weekend or next weekend, great. And that might give you the confidence, but it would just reignite what you've done before. So if the injury is 100% better, you've dealt with why you got it as well, so it's not going to come back. Yes, you could move back, but be careful. You won't have lost as much fitness as you think. I promise.
Brilliant. Great advice as well, and very, very timely, no doubt. Last couple of questions come up then. So Mohammed's come back with, what distance would you run as a warm-up on race day?
For the marathon?
Yeah.
No. The world's best will do a very gentle warm-up, because, and I mean this very politely, they're going to go out and run 4.5 minute miles, 5 minute miles, whoever they are, you know, and that you've got to be warm to start at that pace, because it's just the body needs to have done something, but they're not doing much because they're trying to protect their carbohydrate stores and they're trying to protect their energy. I think for the vast majority of people, use the first few miles to find your what I call marathon pace, or your planned pace for the day. And your warm-up is actually the first mile, 2-3 miles, and then settle and just do it that way. I don't think you need to warm up before your marathon. Protect every bit of glycogen you've got, almost. So just stay warm and make sure you're really well fueled when you stand on that start line.
Yeah, great points. And SP's asked another question around similar that morning of. Would you recommend a little stretch and foam roll on the morning of? Yeah,
if you normally do that, you know, if that's what you do before your long runs, it's part of your warm-up routine, you want to do that, fine. Be careful with doing drills and things, because you can lose 10-20% of your carbohydrate stores. You know, 3 or 4 60-meter strides, which you would do for a faster 10K type race or 5K race, and some drills will take 20 to 25% perhaps of your glycogen stores out of the system. Now, that's not a problem when you're racing 10K. That's a major problem when you're about to start a marathon. So this is why you tend to ease into a marathon. But a little bit of foam rolling, if that's what you're used to, 1 or 2 of your favorite stretches you need to do, yes, but be careful they're not stretches that then switch the body off and then you feel sluggish. So they're active, or there's something that the physio has recommended because it just helps you to mobilize. And I think there's a big difference.
Definitely. And last question then. So it's from Geraldine, that's right. So it's a personal one to her, but again, it's probably something that's you've come across before. So she's suffering with an IT band syndrome at present. Yeah. I've completed a longest run of 18 miles a week ago. Should I try to get to another one in, say, 20 miles, or focus on more shorter runs?
And I'm assuming we're looking at the marathon in 4 weeks' time. If not, I'm going to assume, because it makes the answer easier. I think if you've got to 18, you're probably far more on target than you realize. But IT bands are funny things. If your shoes are right, so there's enough support, you've been doing loads of glute stretching, lower back stretching, so you're really trying to mobilize these areas where we need to unloosen the guitar strings, and the IT band gets very tight around that area of the hip, round to the side of the leg. You've been having your sports massages, you're doing your foam rolling, not too much foam rolling on the IT band because you'll bruise it. You're doing all of those things, and maybe you're using some tape on on the IT band. And if you're clever, perhaps every 5K on your long run, you just pull over and do some stretches for the IT band and glutes, and then carry on. I think you probably can go to 20 miles. And it will be okay, but it's a managed 20 miles. It's a sensible 20 miles. And if there was any sort of, you start it and it's 0 out of 10, but as the run goes on, it's creeping up and you can feel that IT band becoming a problem, forget it, because you've done some good runs already. You will be okay on marathon day, but you may well find you're going to be absolutely fine because you've done all of these things correct and you're going to be all right.
Yeah, it's knowing your body in it and understanding where it's at, and it's a risk reward, I suppose, in terms of what you're trying to do and managing that. Yeah, for sure. Well, because we're good guys, we're going to check another one in because Stephanie's coming with one, so we're going to do it. When in your training would you introduce gels? So, for example, all her half marathon training at the moment, she's doing with no gels. So is there a sweet spot? Is it something you should be doing for your half marathons, for example? Or if you're stepping up?
I think gels are good for half marathons. I know 1 or 2 elites may not take them because they're out for 60 odd, 70 odd minutes and they feel they don't need them. But a lot do take them, and they will take them around about halfway or sort of 7-8 miles, because they just want to make sure that in the last few miles of the half marathon, they really do feel strong and switched on and full of energy and able to attack that final part. Because the half marathon, the last 5K, 5 miles of a half marathon, you really want to be able to push and keep going. And for the experience, it's almost like your best ever threshold run. If it's for you covering the distance, your half marathon might be 2 hours, 2.5 hours plus in time. And that's a long time. So if that's you, you're probably going to take a gel still every 30 to 45 minutes. But if you're looking at doing this and you're competitive and looking for a PB, I still think a gel at 7, 8, 9 miles is good. And I think any of your long runs in the build up to the half marathon, trying the gels, go for it. Just don't do it for the first time on event day. That is the only rule.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more you do it, the more your body gets used to it as well. And I think you have more confidence in it, in your nutrition plan.
And yeah, absolutely. And the final thing on that is, I'm not a fan as well of going out and doing for your marathon, doing 20 odd mile long runs without gels, coming back and also doing it before breakfast, coming back and being so depleted that you lay on the sofa all day and you're exhausted, and then your training's affected for the next few days. I think that damages you. I think it leaves you too tired. And I think any small gains you get are actually completely pushed out the window when it comes to the amount of negatives that go with it. So please fuel your long runs and take your gels and practice them, so that on race day, it's definitely one more thing you haven't got to worry about. It's just organized and you know what works for you.
Yeah, getting my nutrition plan nailed down was an absolute game changer for me, that's for sure. And just to say on that, I've been out there before and I've come back home completely depleted. Had a hot shower, had a bit of food, my body just crashing, and it does affect your life. Your family are then. I've been out for the 3, 4, 5 hour exercise, and now the family want you to go on the park with the kids, and you're like, I'm struggling to stand up a little bit here, and it does roll on and add pressures in other ways. So get your nutrition plan nailed down.
100% agree with you. Yeah, 100% agree with that.
Brilliant. Nick, as always, it goes so quick. So it's just over an hour already. No, not at all. And adding value every day, as they say. On behalf of HIGH5, thanks so much for your time again. I know, I can tell by the comments already that you're giving people more confidence in what they're doing and what they have done. They're really looking forward to the race season now. So all that's left for me to say really is, those that are on the call, thanks so much for joining us, of course, and thanks for interacting. These are all about being interactive and answering the questions from you and using the professionals to do that. Can you please just jump across to HIGH5's social media channels, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, certainly subscribe to their YouTube channels. And this video will be uploaded over the next week or 10 days. And if you found it helpful, please share it with your friends and your family, because I've learned so much tonight anyway, that I'm sure there's other people out there would benefit from these top tips. So thanks very much.
A quick jump in from me. Sorry, Phil. I just wanted to say, I didn't know if we'd worked it out, but thank you so much to everybody for checking in and enjoying the webinar. Like Nick, it's been great. Phil, you guys, I could listen to you chat all night. So yeah, thanks very much. And like Phil said, jump over to the social media if you want to see anything else. But yeah, it's fantastic, and we hope that we can keep giving you these kind of insights into the sort of elite level. And yeah, all the best for anybody that's out there that's doing a marathon, half marathon in the coming weeks. I hope you've taken something from this and that High5's helped you in a way. So thanks to you guys, and yeah, thanks again to Nick and Phil.
No worries, Katie. All the best, guys. Enjoy your run in. Have a good time.
Good luck.